Hello, and welcome back to the fourth episode of the Jorma and John podcast, Roads and Roads.
I believe, is this not Reno Road Part 2?
Yes, Reno Road Part
2.
That's it. All right.
Set my soul on fire, thinking back before I left, the passions I desire. Can you help me anymore? Live my life more.
I hate to turn that down, Jorma, but we gotta.
We can listen to it later.
We'll listen to it later. Well, anyhow, welcome back. Nice to be here again. Last time we were together, we were talking about Reno Road, Jorma's brand new record of golden old material from 1960.
Yeah, wow.
That, Jorma, is 65 years ago.
Oh, boy.
You must record it when you were one, because, I mean, God,
right.
You know, such a young guy.
It was a long time ago.
But anyhow, as we mentioned, 23 songs on here. 17 songs in the Jorma playbook and Hot Tuna playbook still to this day. They did a great job on this. We kind of touched base on it a little bit last time we talked, but it really goes to say the cover artwork is just beautiful, done by our artist and dear friend Kevin Morgan.
Correctamundo.
And he really went out for you because, you know, he wanted to paint something original that would kind of reflect a 60s, late 50s vibe type thing. And boy, it really is like a cool piece of artwork, you know. The picture of an artist as a young man, young Jorma there. Yeah, boy. I love that, Jorma, the tape box on back. This is a beautiful piece they did. And once again, we thank Jack Cassidy for having the vision to hit that play button on that Wollensack recorder at the right moment in time, and also our dear friend Ricky Sanchez, who did such a great job remastering.
Yeah, he sure did.
Now, you know, Jorma, when Vanessa got that, I think it was a CD burn copy maybe from Jack and stuff, and we listened to it, and it sounded really great to me to begin with. Did Ricky have to do a lot of work to restore that tape, or was it?
That's a good question. The answer is I really don't know. But we have learned over the years that getting a recorded project ready to be put into a media like this, or whatever the final thing is, requires work. You can't just use the raw footage.
Yeah. But the raw footage you got
it was good. Now the raw footage was great, which means it was probably reasonably easy for him to,
which is always nice, you know,
to bring it into a state of near perfection.
We don't want to work that boy too hard, you know, and. Yeah, so anyhow, Jorma, last time when we were talking about this record and where we left off, and we had some ideas. We were going to talk about some of the rest of the records on Reno Road, the songs on Reno Road we didn't get to. And I also wanted to talk to you a little more about the Rev, because we started to talk about him, and the time ran out because it just
as time does.
I'm hoping we don't have to do an episode 3 and we could get through this one here today. But anyhow, Jorma, we were going to talk
about
Jack's house and the rec room, and the place where this started. And I guess let me point real quick, Jorma, I'll be quick, on the inside cover. I love this. There's the Reno Road house.
There it is.
And these are pictures in Jack's house here. This was an interesting looking spot here in the house. Nice kind of like couch or something.
Yeah. So.
Yeah,
Jack's dad was one of these guys that really, he was a dentist by profession, but he built things, like he built radios and he did furniture, he did all kinds of stuff. And so he had built, back in the era when I was a kid, a basement was just like a dank, mildewy, the furnace was there, the heater was there might be a wash tub like at my house. Because my house was built before there were washing machines around and stuff like that. There was like a wash tub and all this kind of stuff. So I never saw his before his dad built the rec room, but he had pine paneling, and he had like would have, I don't know where he got them, but he would have like some like a Technicolor picture of maybe a beach or something like that, but there'd be lights behind it. You know, it was
Classic.
Totally classic. So, yeah, so the Rec Room was Jack's one of Jack's dad's masterpieces, and for whatever reason, also probably because of the pine paneling and stuff, it also had a pretty good sound too.
Mm-hmm. Did Jack have a stereo down there? Or listen to records down there? That kind of thing.
I don't think anybody had a stereo yet back then. It'd be hard to. I certainly didn't. I didn't get a stereo. Wow. Until like almost the mid '60s. Jack's Wallensack tape recorder, the recorder that he recorded all this stuff on, was if you had the other half, it became stereo, but he didn't have that. So it was a quarter track stereo. So on one reel of tape, you'd have two different recorded programs going one way and two going the other. And since Jack only had it, you could get like 4 times as much stuff on one reel of tape.
What do you use for playback to listen to it after?
Did the same thing.
Just, okay.
It had a little speaker on
Okay.
it.
All right.
I mean, you know, we take for granted all the stuff we plug in today, or yeah, we'll just Bluetooth it to the TV or
Right.
whatever. You know.
Yeah, different times for sure. Now you mentioned the record thing, but I remember you saying that Jack's brother Chick had like the record collection that turned. So
Sure.
he must have had a.
Yeah. So Jack, you know something I don't remember because it's a lifetime ago, but Chick certainly had his own record player in his room as long as he lived at home. But Chick's brother certainly is the guy that turned me on, really, to blues in general. You know, we all love rock and roll and stuff like that. But Chick had all the chess recordings and all that stuff out of Chicago, and you know, and I never heard any of that stuff before. So, you know, when I got to Andie College a couple of years later, of course, that was like dorm room staple music,
Right.
you know. But at the time, it was like, well, Little Walter, well, that doesn't sound like a harmonica.
Sounds like he gave you a good background.
He did. He
And,
certainly did.
So, in other words, even before you got over to Antioch, you had already been listening to blues
Correct.
and all that kind of
Correct.
stuff. Yeah. And were you listening to the acoustic type blues that you end up playing so much?
No,
or-
not really. Most of the time it was
Electric stuff.
like Chicago blues, different guys. Sonny Boy Williamson, 1 and 2. Little Walter, of course. Muddy Waters,
Muddy had
of
to be
course.
there, yep.
The Wolf.
Boy, a lot of crucial guys coming out of that
Crucial.
era there. Crucial in the
Crucial.
Chicago Sound Boys. So many great players.
So-
and all.
Yeah, acoustic blues hadn't reared its magnificent head yet to me.
Well, let's go back and Jorma, let's talk about the Rev.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, would you say, I know Ian was a tremendous influence on your playing and as a teacher and everything else, but does the Rev fit in there as kind of like your main mentor as far as playing style
No,
and stuff?
the Rev wasn't really. I would say Ian would have been my main mentor. He turned me on to the Rev's work, of course, and I got a chance when I was working in New York in 1960. I got a chance to see the Rev play a number of times, but the Rev was not really my source. And the other thing too, also, is that I never had the talent to replicate the masters, you know, which has stood me in good stead as an artist because I sound like me. But I took what I needed and just moved on, you know, and so my playing is really nothing like the Reverend's whatsoever on a lot of levels. I mean, I do the songs, and if it's a song that I learned off a Reverend record, the important thing to me was to capture enough of the Reverend's idiosyncrasies in the song, so people go, yeah, that's Reverend Davis' song. The fact that the Reverend only played with 2 fingers and I played with 3 means that the rhythm structures are completely different, and that's just the way it is, you know. So yeah, the Rev was a huge influence and a muse to me in many ways, but it wasn't important for me to quote unquote sound like the Rev.
Yeah. What is the difference when you're talking about the 2 to 3 finger thing, and why would the Rev just use 2 instead of using 3?
Just the way.
how
That's
you
very
do it?
interesting. So, you know, given under a perfect set of circumstances, you've got 5 fingers on one hand. You could do a lot of stuff. I learned because Ian was primarily a 3-finger picker, although he could do all the Reverend stuff with 2 fingers, as the Reverend did also. But So I would use these two fingers as a brace. I would never play unbraced ever. I just didn't learn that way. And as a result of these three fingers here, there's lots of triplet fingers in my music because there's three things there. Not so with the Reverend because only he had two. I'm not saying he couldn't have done that because he was a masterful guitar player, but so his style, if you see videos or old movies of the Reverend playing, it's very bouncy going back and forth. So his thumb is doing this, and then he's got the melodies coming on the top.
Yeah. Really, just the one finger?
One finger.
Wow.
That's it.
So it wasn't like something you would grow from using one finger to two or three. It was you used one finger because that's what your style and comfort was.
I mean, that's just the way he did it, but it just didn't make sense to me for whatever reason in the beginning not to use two fingers. And I never gave another thought to using these two fingers here. Those are always a brace. Now, there's a lot of people that are watching this podcast and play the guitar know there's a lot of ways to skin this cat, and everybody's got an opinion about stuff. To me, just because I never use them, these are weak fingers. I would never even consider plucking a string with these fingers.
Interesting.
I just didn't learn that way.
Yeah.
And because I've been doing this all my life, these things are very strong. Again, a lot of ways to do that. But
they have served you well.
They have served me well.
Yeah.
And they will continue to serve me well, I hope.
I bet they will, Jorma. No doubt about it. All right, well, another thing we mentioned is a couple of the songs, 6 songs of the Rev on Reno Road.
Right.
So you could tell he had made major mojo in your world at that time.
Well, the other thing, that's all I knew.
That's what Ian taught.
It's not like I sought the Rev out. In these conversations that we have, and with other people that want to go back in the past, it's almost as if, did you architect your development? The answer is no. I responded to my environment, and my environment in this time, gave me Ian, who was my gateway to everything, and along the way, because the stuff for some reason just resonated with me, I adapted a lot of the Rev's material. Now Ian's muse, as I've mentioned before, was Snooks Eaglin. And Snooks Eaglin, there's a Folkways record called Snooks Eaglin, New Orleans Street Singer, where he kind of basically plays, not simple, because none of his stuff was ever simple, but basically more blues, traditional blues-oriented stuff. But Snooks Eaglin was more of a jazz guitar player in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that was way over my head. And also, I was just ate up with the whole blues thing, the message, the lyric, the sound, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so Snooks Eaglin was a big part of where Ian was coming from. But as I said, that was way over my head. For some reason, the Reverend just said, you need to get to know me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you took him up on that.
Me too.
So if he showed you some Snooks Eaglin stuff, it's just you let that kind of go?
No, he actually... he didn't choose to show me stuff. I would ask him to show me stuff that I liked.
Ah, okay.
And I immediately looked at that. It was over my head. I don't need to,
right.
I'll look at this in another lifetime.
Yes, I don't need those notes. That great Rev record we've talked about for 1960, Harlem Street Singer.
Right.
I was, Rudy Van Gelder was the engineer on that record.
Right.
The great jazz Blue Note engineer, and especially you and I have been getting some of these Blue Note reissues on vinyl. They do such a great job.
Yeah.
Rudy Van Gelder, boy, he was the man.
Yeah, he was a great recordist, and those the 4 Reverend Davis albums from those sessions. Harlem Street Singer, Say No to the Devil, Have More Faith in Jesus, and the guitar banjo and 12-string of Reverend Gary Davis. Those 4, Reverend was in peak form back then, and of course, as previously mentioned, Rudy Van Gelder was like the man for live recordings. The recordings are great. Now, there's a couple of interesting things, to geek out on this for a minute. Depending on the pressing that you have of these records, one of the because I've got a bunch of different versions of this because I'm a geek and I can't help it. And I can't remember which one it is because I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but I think it might have been Say No to the Devil. Maybe it was Have More Faith in Jesus, I forget. But one of those things, when they did that pressing, the Reverend's voice is on one channel and the guitar's on the other.
Wow.
Now that's great if you want to learn the guitar part, but in terms of an audiophile experience, not so great.
Yeah. So like separated this way? Or
Completely.
Yeah.
Weird, huh?
Old time recording.
Yeah, but I've got a couple different versions, and most of them
mixed together.
are beautifully mixed, so
Yeah.
you don't think about it. Anyway.
Probably a rare collector's item.
Could be.
You are the Rev, a Piedmont player, right? Is that
Right,
the
so
type of blues that...
You know, it's really funny because when I was learning, I didn't care about the history of the music. I didn't care who the artists were. I didn't, you know, a lot of people of my generation, and after, of course, are geek out about that stuff. And that's good, because it's good stuff to know. But as a young guy learning to play the music, that I just really didn't care about it. In fact, I think I mentioned this to you off camera, I didn't even realize that Hesitation Blues that I played was a more or less Gary Davis version until I recorded it on the first Hot Tuna record, and we had to get publishing for it. I went, wow, it's a Reverend song? Yeah. And then you listen to it, of course it is, you moron, you know.
Another one.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyhow, so I was just really interested in the source. To get back to the stuff, you know, if I heard something that I liked, you know, I would focus on it. The other thing, too, is that, you know, you think about all the stuff that's available today, you know, on YouTube or whatever rabbit hole that you choose to find stuff on. And I wonder, you know, on the one hand, there's a lot of young players that grow very quickly because their exposure to this stuff and ability to learn off videos and stuff like that and recordings. I wonder, I mean, obviously, listen, this is old guy stuff. This is old guy stuff. If I had to relearn today, I'm not sure that would have worked for me. I just focused on one thing, like I think I've mentioned before. When I left the States and went back to the Philippines for a year, I had the Harlem Street Singer and the Reverend Gary Davis album that he's on Riverside that he split with Pink Anderson. That's the only two records I listened to for a year.
Wow. That could be a big influence on you.
Well, I mean, it was good in terms of, it worked for me. It worked for me.
I bet it did. You know, Jorma, I wonder even back then, you know, of course, through the Fur Peace Ranch and, you know, a lot of the great teachers we had come through, blues teachers, you know, like Rory Bookbinder, for instance. But, you know, people talk about Piedmont blues, Delta blues, Hill blues, you know, like the Burnside stuff and things like that.
Sure.
Back then, were you guys calling that stuff Piedmont blues?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was already kind of a...
Right, so,
a style.
again, I'm not an authority on this. My recollection is that the holy triumvirate of Piedmont players was Blind Reverend Davis, Blind Blake, and Blind Boy Fuller. Now, you know, over the years, because so much stuff surfaces that was unavailable to us back then, there's a whole scene down there, and there's a lot of really great players that I'm unfamiliar with because
so there's a lot
because I'm not down that rabbit hole anymore. But yeah, but it's a deep well, and there's a lot of good stuff. I mean, I just wonder. Again, all I can say is that my method worked out for me. I focused on a limited number of stuff, and I adapted it to my style without even, I mean, it's not like, you know, yeah, this Reverend Davis, he's pretty good, but I'm going to, you know, like people say in our guitar classes, I'm going to make it my own. Now, there's, you know, as a teacher, there's a couple ways of looking at make it your own. Are you making it your own because you can't play it the right way? Is that things?
Sometimes
or are you
happens.
Actually making it whatever, you know?
Right.
So there's a creative process here. But yeah, I mean, I just would have been inundated with the stuff that's available today, but because there was very little. You know, for example, of the Blind Blake stuff, I think the only Blind Blake stuff that I really got a chance to listen to a lot is I got West Coast Blues off of 78 that I recorded on not West Coast Blues, Police Dog Blues off of 78. And funny story about that.
Yeah.
I guess it was probably 65 or 66. We had just moved to San Francisco. The airplane was getting started. And I was working on Police Dog Blues. And I could hear it was an E, because thank God Blind Blake tuned to pitch. So, or in any case, I knew it was an E. So I'm doing this stuff. And Garcia stopped by. Yes, That Garcia, our old buddy Jerry.
Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry stopped by, and I'm doing this stuff, and he goes, "You idiot, you're making it too difficult. It's an E tuning." I'm going, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No, listen," because the song starts with chimes, octave chimes. I'm going, "God, you're right. Why didn't I even think about that?" So I put it in E tuning, and boom, immediately became apparent how the whole song went.
Wow.
Thanks, Jer. Appreciate it.
The light went on. Since you had mentioned about seeing the Rev live, reflect on that a little bit, if you would. Now, did you see him in clubs? Like, I always heard the stories that, he did the street stuff, too.
Yeah, I never saw him on the street. I saw him at Gertie's Folk City when I was in New York on a number of occasions. And years later, this probably would have been either just before or right around the time that the airplane was getting started. He played a show in Sacramento, and I drove up to see it. And I remember that that he remembered me. And I remember talking to Ernie Hawkins, who's a great disciple of the Rev.
Sure.
And if one needs to learn how the Rev did it, and it explained by a guy that can really do it, Ernie, in my opinion, Ernie's the man. But anyway, so I talked to Ernie about this. I said, I didn't know that. Was he just being polite, and he said, no, if he said he recognized you, he really did.
Yeah, that's a cool way to think about him recognizing you.
Very flattering, yeah.
That's the interesting thing about the Rev driving out to Sacramento. I bet he had maybe Ernie or Roy driving for him or something.
Yeah, I mean,
but
I guess,
that would be a big deal coming from New York City at that time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's going across the country.
Sure.
Yeah. And so Gertie's Folk City, I know Stephen Grossman has put out a lot of the Rev stuff, and of course he a big Rev disciple as well.
Yeah.
And he has that live at Folk City, Gertie's, which is a
sure.
great
Yeah. Stephen's really got, I think, the most impressive collection.
Yeah.
And
he again worked with the Rev at an early age, right? Like
right, and he is a stellar player himself, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, that was always the interesting thing with them coming through the ranch, because you hear the stories where Roy fit in, and then Ernie came after Roy or something like that, and they all so you got to see him at Gertie's Folk City. Now, was he of the type that the place was packed?
So I guess if the Reverend was a local guy. So it's not like, wow, the Reverend Davis is coming to town. He was there all the time.
Every Friday night or something.
I'll tell you, one time I was at Gertie's when the place was really packed. It was when John Lee Hooker was playing there. But Gertie's was the place. It was I mean, first it was like a neighborhood bar, so the bar was always full, and they gave rank amateurs such as myself an opportunity to play, and they had national acts.
Was that the biggest place, like Gertie's?
I don't think so. I think
Cafe Wah.
That's a good. Something, I never did the Wah. Dino Valenti was the guy at the Wah. That's a good question.
Now, did you get to see a lot of good blues music at Gertie's Folk City when you were during that time? Coming through, or was that kind of a rarity?
Honestly, the only thing I can really remember is seeing John Lee Hooker and the Reverend at.
Two great guys to see.
Yeah, certainly were.
Yeah. Yeah, right. You know what I wanted to also ask you, when you learned these songs from Ian and as you advanced and stuff, were there any Rev songs that you might have played as a young man that you just decided you didn't want to play anymore?
I don't. There are songs that I've lost over the years, and if we were to look at the track sheet, the track sheet on Reno Road, there's a bunch of songs that I've lost. 12 Gates to the City.
That was a very tough song. There's a lot to that song.
It was a little bit different. It was a little bit different as Rev songs are. But, you just can't remember everything. And, as I started to write songs myself and as time went on and I moved to California, there was more distance between, surrounded by ground zero for that stuff. I just let a lot of stuff go,
Yeah.
And, listening to some of these recordings here, if I was to bring them back, even if I could, it would take a lot of work.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said when you said you didn't play like the masters. I think you're slighting yourself, because I think you were playing already like a master. And my thing is, I listened before the show, I listened to the CD last night again, and stuff put me in the mood. But I thought to myself, boy, it seemed like you were following very close to the Rev style at this time compared to how these songs have evolved over the 60 years you've been performing them. I guess my question to you is, when did they start to evolve? When did you start feeling comfortable adding little things? And are you still adding little things today?
So when these recordings surfaced and I listened to them, one of the things that I said when I first heard them was, "Wow, it's pretty good for somebody that had been playing the guitar for a couple of months."
It's really hard to believe. I mean, it's so good, Jorma.
So I definitely had a thing. When I was learning in that time period, I think that, and I probably got this from Ian, but I think what was really important to me, and I'm sure I didn't intellectualize this at the time, was really important to me was keeping the groove alive. My right hand was really solid. And when I'm teaching, which we've been doing for quite a while here, I always tell the guys, you've got to be able to control your right hand, whether it's a flat pick or whatever. But with the if you're playing with your fingers, your rhythm section, which is your thumb, just has to be controllable. Now, it doesn't need to be there all the time, obviously, but you need to be able to have it there all the time if you want. And many people, as they learn, become pretty good players, but they let that slide. And in my humble, non-judgmental opinion, that's what separates, real success from moderate success.
Mm-hmm. That thumb is ever important.
Right.
Very important.
Where were we?
Well, I was still talking about the Rev a little bit.
Rev.
And let's talk about the evolution, Jorma, because
yes, right.
Yeah, because the songs that as you play them now, they really have evolved, become more, Jorma stuff in there.
I was on that New York episode of my life, which is so defined, who I've become over the years, lasted 3 months, and then it was gone. And when I moved out to California, I was just working on doing my thing. I mean, first of all, because I was a new kid in town. California has a huge amount of really, really good folk musicians of many genres, bluegrass, and all that stuff, as you know. And so, as my repertoire developed, I just let some things go. And, as I got further away from my connection with my people that were inspirational to me, or inspiring to me in New York, my style just developed. So I didn't set out to make it differently, but, I think that anybody that plays an instrument for a while will develop their own style. Mm-hmm. And if they're lucky, it'll be pleasant to listen to.
Yeah, that's a nice
But,
thing.
so, as I got, 3,000 miles away from New York, I guess that initial sonic experience dissipated, and I just sort of started developing my own.
Were you aware of these changes as you're playing?
I don't think I gave it a second.
Just kind of organically happened.
Yeah, I don't think I gave it a second thought. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jorma. We spoke about the Reno Road having 17 of the 23 songs, still songs that you play to this day.
Sure.
And also in our great last episode of this program, Reno Road, how do you say number one? Numero uno, Reno Road, the first episode.
Yes.
Yes, in the first episode, we were saying.
Yes, I remember that. We spoke of this.
Yes. The Hot Tuna record, the first one that come out,
right,
were all songs not from Reno Road
Absolutely.
as well, other than the two originals you had put on there.
And I've said that if I'd been thinking when that record was first released, I would have dedicated it to Ian, because except for the two songs that I wrote, those were all songs I learned from him.
Right. Well, my question is, were you Jack's muse? Was he turned on to this music by recording you and then saying, I really like what you're doing? Or was he kind of like in a parallel universe? Was he hip to the Rev stuff and all that stuff when you come to get the recording?
He came up to New York and heard him. But that, Jack was playing in like, bar bands, rhythm and blues bands, big bands with horn sections and stuff. I don't think, Jack's a very eclectic music listener. I'm sure he listened to lots of stuff, but I couldn't tell you what of the country blues players, or however you want to categorize this, he listened to. He's always listened to lots of stuff, lots of jazz. He probably listened to more jazz than blues stuff back then. In any case, I don't think that whatever I was doing then, I don't think he gave it a second thought until we started to play together. The fact that we had, I think, such a long-standing bond of friendship that it just clicked for us. We didn't have to get to know each other because we knew each other.
Right. Jorma, the way you play these songs, even though they're hot tuna songs and the Jorma solo songs as well, how do you approach that when you're, say, playing it without Jack being there? Is there anything noticeably you find yourself doing or that you have to do to fill in? Or
so obviously, when I play with Jack, there's more opportunities for me to to improvise a little and do stuff like that, and it's not as critical that my thumb be, as rock solid as it would be if I were doing a solo show. I mean, you play with, you play both solo and with numbers of different people, and you probably, without even thinking about it, adapt to whatever the environment gives you. So if you're, if I was doing just playing a solo thing, obviously I would want my thumb to be rock solid, and when I'm playing with Jack, I can do rhythmic things where I'm grabbing tone clusters and stuff like that rather than having the alternating.
He's got it covered.
Yeah, but the other thing too is that so far, thank goodness, my sense of timing is really good. So I don't lose, probably because I spend so much time as a young musician never not having that thumb, Yeah. So I can do different arrangements and move stuff around without losing the beat so far.
Just keep it up, will you?
Working on it.
You're like a Swiss clock, I'll tell you. Now, I'll tell you, Jorma, we are going to go talk about Reno Road here in a minute, but I got a few other things here. So we're talking about the acoustic blues and just how the kind of music you were playing in 1960, it wasn't something like everybody was playing. You look at the blues scene today, and you and I have talked about this, some of these electric guitar blues players, it's like it becomes just a gigantic pool of them and not a lot different separating people out.
Right.
Could also be the era, we're in a point now where so much music has been played.
Right.
Were there other acoustic blues people, contemporaries, that you might listen to and thought, wow, that's interesting what they're doing?
Today or back then?
Back then.
So I don't think we've talked about him much, but he needs to be talked about, and that's Brownie McGhee. So when I was learning, because again, the well wasn't as deep or as accessible, I wasn't the guy with the 1,000,078s and stuff like that. Brownie McGhee had a 10-inch Folkways record where it's just him solo. It's got 8 songs on it. Of course, the great Happy Trail, may he rest in peace, was a dear friend and student of Brownie's, so he knew all those songs. I used to, again, I've let these go, but I think I used to do every song on that Folkways record. That was a big part of my thing back in those days, but I'm sad to say I've let it go. But Brownie, there was just a thing about his playing, Yeah, he was great back in Sonny Terry, and they had this whole thing. But that solo record, Brownie was a monster player, and all I can say is wow, So in some ways, Brownie doesn't get talked about as much, but I was certainly inspired, by a lot of the stuff that I heard him do. The other thing too is, as a young musician coming up, I wasn't writing songs. So my source material was to learn and de facto interpret whoever I was trying to learn, And some guys were very, very good at being able to replicate whatever master they chose to study. You know, I wasn't that guy, but I was good at being able to adapt whatever I was trying to learn without losing too much into my own style. Again, you know, as an artist, that's a good thing.
I think we need to bring some Brownie McGhee back into your repertoire and have you go back.
That's
and
not a
think
bad
about
idea.
that.
Yeah.
Now, you want to help me on that, but Brownie's a later era than the Rev, right? But I think isn't he still considered like a Piedmont or hill player?
I don't think Brownie. You know
He
something?
wasn't
That's a good question. I don't know where Brownie is from. I'd have to look it up.
We'll look that up.
Yeah.
And you remember, so John Hammond went to school with you in 1960 at Antioch as well.
Yeah.
And so were you, at that time, did you ever get to sit and play guitar with John? Did he play guitar with Ian?
The style of guitar that we're talking about here, this fingerstyle guitar, it's not a jamming style. You know, people go all the time. I mean, I've heard this question. Well, did you ever jam with the Reverend? Nobody jams with the Reverend because it's so complete. And I'm sure you've seen that Pete Seeger Rainbow Bridge thing.
No, I haven't.
With Donovan?
No.
What?
Okay. I gotta read Heinlein and see this.
No, well, listen.
Yeah.
When we get done,
okay,
with this, you've got to go to YouTube and you've got to. Pete Seeger had this show called Rainbow Bridge, and he did his Pete thing and had all these people on this particular show.
Wow.
It's Pete, Reverend Davis, Donovan, and whoever Donovan's accompanist was at the time. And the Rev does Children of Zion, like a 6-minute version. And Pete occasionally tries to get in there with the banjo, but nobody jams with the Reverend. You know, there's no room for that. And and I can see, it looks, you're gonna love this. It looks like Pete wants to bring the Rev in for a landing, but the Rev doesn't come in for a landing till he's ready. He preached the whole Children of Zion, I forget how long it was, but it was long. And just played incredible shit nonstop, you know. Anyway.
Oh boy!
Yeah.
So was that a Pete Seeger show that was ongoing for a period?
Yeah, I think it was on
PBS.
it's a PBS show. I think it was a PBS show.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the point is like the style that we're talking about is complete in and of itself. It's like, would you get two great classical guitar players to jam together? The answer is no, because if they're playing written classical music, each one of them has a complete version of what needs to be done. Now, of course, people, great players have arranged stuff, and but you need to arrange it, and we were doing arranging. So the simple answer is, this is not jamming music.
No
It's
jamming.
like,
No jamming.
let's get together and we'll play West Coast blues until the cows come home.
How about John and Ian? Were you?
So John was younger, and John, John Hammond, we've been friends for a very, very long time, is one of the most interesting cases of an artist developing that I personally have ever seen. So when John came to Antioch, he had reel-to-reel tapes of the Robert Johnson recordings that his dad did.
Wow.
Nobody had heard any of this stuff. They weren't it wasn't released. So when we heard these reel tapes, nobody, certainly not me, had ever heard anything like this ever.
Wow.
And I remember listening to it.
What a thing to have.
And flipping out, of course, because all these great songs, all the, the songs that
Crossroads.
Yeah, the whole deal. Yeah, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And John, within a quarter of us being at Antioch, had become the John Hammond we know. Now, John doesn't play like Robert Johnson. John immediately developed his own style.
Right. Yep.
But his source was certainly at that moment those recordings. But John Hammond became John Hammond overnight, and within a year he'd made that first record on Vanguard, and he was
The guy.
John Hammond.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, all those early records on Vanguard, boy, it was.
Yeah.
And you see such a young guy on the cover and all
Yeah.
that stuff there. How many fingers did he use?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's all right.
John has a very eccentric right-hand style, and I'm going out on a limb here because this memory is so fragile. What did you say your name was? I got it. Yeah. I think John's a three-finger picker, but but maybe. But the simple answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there's so many polyrhythms with the way that John plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when he taught for us at the ranch early on in the Fur Peace Ranch. It's like a quarter of a century ago.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, how is he going to teach how to do this stuff? Because it's really sophisticated.
Hard to translate it.
And the answer is, I think his students really need to pay attention. I mean, I can take any one of my songs and I can show somebody more or less exactly what I'm doing most of the time. But that sort of polyrhythm things that John did, I go, wow, they're going to have to pay attention.
Yeah, he really his career really. So he was happening at a pretty young age.
Sure.
Records and stuff.
And if you recall, Atlantic tried to. There's a moment there in time when he almost crossed over and became a pop
Southern
blues
Fried.
star. No.
Even before that.
It's Too Late, She's Gone.
Ah.
I remember being in Dr. Generosity's, which was a bar
Great name.
up in the Upper Manhattan and stuff like that, and going to the jukebox and seeing John Hammond, It's Too Late, She's Gone.
Wow.
Anyhow, so yeah, he had a moderate hit with that, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did he ever finish Antioch? Do you know, or did he just?
No,
he dropped out. He in the music.
He got what he needed at Andie. And moved on.
He moved on. You remember you used the J50 for your Reno Road record.
Yes.
Rather than asking to repeat things again, I happened to bring our first record together, the River Flows record, where in the
a classic
in the record. Boy, Culture Factory did us so proud. They had this beautiful book, but they had the picture of you with the J50, which would be your guitar,
the old J50,
your guitar from the time there. And I just want to read it to you, Jorma. Is that there has been one constant in my musical life since I began to actually learn how to play guitar, and that has always been and will be my 1958 Gibson J50. In 1960 at Antioch College, while I was beginning to unravel the mysteries of finger-picking guitar, I didn't even own an acoustic guitar. A friend told me about Pop's Music Store in Dayton, Ohio. For some reason, I had a no-name 5-string banjo I had no use for. So armed with that and a $100 bill, I hitched a ride from Yellow Springs to Dayton, and the deal was consummated. And you go on to say how the J50 was your friend that you spent all the time with, practiced with all the time. It was the guitar you learned the Reverend Gary Davis songs on. It was the guitar you played Embryonic Journey on, and the guitar you used on the first Hot Tuna record. So it as you say, it has served
It's the only acoustic guitar I own.
It has served you well. So reflect on that, Jorma, if you would, like going down and getting that guitar for the first time.
So like this,
ride down a date and the whole thing.
This guitar here, this is a David Flamand guitar, and it was just here because I was waiting for you to come. I was practicing some guitar,
yes.
But anyway, it's essentially the same style as a J50, and yeah, that J50 was just defined my musical life for many years. I mean, it was the only guitar that I owned for a really, really long time. And I was very fortunate because it happened to be a really good one. Mm-hmm. Acoustic guitars, this is a golden age for acoustic guitars today. There's a lot of guys building great guitars, and there's all kinds of good stuff around, and that's good.
Yeah.
And many of them are affordable. Some of them are ridiculously expensive too. But anyway, so yeah, that J50, that was a constant companion. Wow. Well into the airplane. I remember, I guess I was still in the airplane. I had a friend named Paul Ziegler down in San Jose, and he knew this guy named Roy Noble that was building guitars. I don't know if Roy's still alive or not. And Roy, I'd really like to build you a guitar. What would you like? And I'd want one exactly like my J50. And so he built me this Brazilian rosewood thing that was a smaller body guitar. And it wasn't exactly like my J50, and I kept it long enough so I wouldn't feel bad, and I sold it.
Yeah. This one, I know the Flamand you're pretty happy with.
I am really happy, yeah. Yeah, David You know, again, there's a lot of great guitar players, but David just builds really, really great guitars. And, you know, his version of this J35 Gibson thing, the 36 J35, it's been my companion for, I'm trying to think, right before COVID, since right before COVID.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're keeping that J50 close by. And
no, the J50 hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, I really need to take it out, give it a little love, put some new strings on it.
There you go. Yeah, especially good time of the year to do that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, the J50 came out for some of those quarantine concerts we did.
Yeah, and indeed at the record, the River Flows is what you used.
What a coincidence!
Used the J50 on
I
that
did.
record. It has served you well.
Yeah, it's a great guitar. It's a great guitar.
Well, boy, I bet our producers are going to tell us that the time is rolling on. Let's talk again about some of these. There's a few songs we still want to talk about on the Reno Road record.
Sure.
And I'd love to turn and play a little bit of this 99-year blues. I'd like to play a little bit for you, Jorma. And this is, again, from the Reno Road record, 99-year blues. Is that loud enough? There you go.
I got arrested. On Tuesday I was tried. The judge he found me guilty. Lord, I hung my head and cried. Hung and cried. Hung and cried.
I'd like to listen to the whole song, but we better. Our time is running out. Let me get right on what I want to ask you.
Okay.
So we don't start with "Bring Me My Pistol," 2 round balls. What's going on here? So this 99-year blues by Julius Daniels,
right?
Recorded in the 20s or 30s, but released on Folkways in 1952. And you want to tell us about these lyrics we just heard, and at what point did they start to evolve to the 99-year blues that we know you for today?
So I learned it from Ian. I didn't learn it off the record. Mm-hmm. And but interestingly enough, you know, those of us that, I know some of us, actually including you, which is unbelievable, have a smartphone.
Yep.
Do you have?
I wish I knew how it worked.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately,
it's
you
smarter
have
than me.
You have younger friends that know how it works.
They help me.
Anyhow, so there's a music streaming service called Tidal, and they have some very, you know, I've got a high-end streaming thing in my hi-fi, and I've got a Tidal account, blah, blah, blah. And they have not only they have very high quality stuff, but they just have, it's amazing, you know. So I went, Julius Daniels, 99-year blues in my Tidal account, boom, the original recording popped out. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know. And so as a guitar player, 99-year blues, it's a 1-chord song. But there's a lot of like, without using a lot of notes, there's a lot of like subtle motion. It doesn't really sound like a 1-chord song. It's really interesting. Mm-hmm. We could geek out about this forever, but I'm going to try not to. But yeah, I think it was called, I think when I learned it, it was called RC Mountain Lion or something like that.
Okay.
I forget. But it's 99-year blues.
When did that different lyrics start to come in?
Pardon?
When did you start adding some lyrics to that song?
You know, I couldn't even begin to tell you. It just seemed to make sense at the time. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it could have been where we recorded it on Burgers and I'd forgotten the lyrics and I just had to make up some. I don't know.
Well, you made up some good ones.
Well, you know.
I know.
In the words of Reverend Thomas Dorsey, song after song flowed from my pen.
Yes, you are a rich man. Yeah, well, it's such a cool song, and I know it's still one of your fan favorites. People love when you.
It's a crowd pleaser.
It's a crowd pleaser.
You know, and one of the things I always think is funny, you know, especially as my crowd is more august in their countenance. You know,
definitely.
Bring me a pistol, 3-round ball, gonna shoot everybody. I don't like it. The crowd, yay! I'm going. That's the spirit.
Yeah, there
that's
you go.
the spirit.
Yeah. Put that right in there with the Rev, 12 Gates of the City, you know.
Good stuff.
Okay, moving on. We mentioned, we just combined the two Jelly Roll Morton songs on the record, the six Rev records songs on the record. Nobody knows you when you're down.
Before we get to that, I need to interject this quickly. The Jelly Roll Morton songs. So I've been on the road, as you know. I have to work sometimes too.
Yep.
And while I'm sitting around, I'm like, I go down the YouTube rabbit hole like many people do. And I went to one of the original versions, not the Library of Congress recording version, original recordings of Jelly Roll Morton's Whining Boy Blues. And I will tell you, that version is the filthiest song I have ever heard, and I've heard a lot of them.
Yes, including some of the versions you've done.
Some of them are pretty raunchy, but that's nothing. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
Nobody knows you when you're down and out. Again, another one of the songs that you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, I would have gotten that from Ian, and I think that I perfected or whatever, came upon the version that I have now by backing Janice on the song.
That's on the typewriter tapes.
I believe it is.
Boy, oh boy. Nice that some of these historic recordings have persevered and been preserved.
What a gal.
Yeah. We'll have to do a podcast on that someday.
We should.
Yeah. Yeah, we got so many great things happening. Vanessa told me that, Jack's going to be coming in for our Fur Peace Productions shows in July.
We better get our talking done now, because once you get Jack on the show...
We're going to get him in here, and we're going to talk to you both at the same time.
Yeah, we'll do our best.
Have you guys send questions back and forth.
It'll be great.
Yeah. But anyhow, Jorma, That'll Never Happen No More. Yeah, nobody knows you when you're down and out. I'm sorry, nobody knows you when you're down and out. A great song that has stayed with you for a long time. We're going to go to the next song on the record called "Bottle Up and Go," a Tommy McLennan song, 1939. Hooker did it in 1959. That's that "Bottle Up and Go." And I'd asked you if you had played that with Chris Smither, and it's a different.
But I think Chris did the Big Bill Brunsey version. I think. I learned mine from Ian.
Mm-hmm. And it's a different title, right?
It may even be a somewhat different song.
Okay. Yeah. That's a cool song, man. Maybe you need to bring that back into the repertoire at some point.
Could be.
That might be something.
I'll have to buy a copy of Reno Road, and
I bet we could get you one. Now listen, I want to go to "That'll Never Happen No More" next, and let's hear just a little bit of that if you don't mind. Just running through quickly.
I understand.
Jorma, now I'll tell you what, I listened to that song right there, and it's 1960, and you can hear you doing it in 2025, just on the tour you just did with Jack, and there's 65 years difference between those recordings. And I listened to it, and listening to the song just now, as we heard on the radio, Dreamstream radio here, it's not like there's 65 years in between there. It seems like it just flowed right inside.
I'll tell you what I notice, and it's something that guys like me that have been playing for a long time need to contend with. I like the tempo of that. I tend to do that song, because I've gotten so glib with the song too fast these days. That's the tempo.
That's a nice tempo.
Oh, totally. That's the one, yeah.
Well, you're a harsh critic of yourself. I think it sounded great in 1960, and 2025 it sounds great as well.
It's different. I understand.
It always sounds good.
I understand.
That is again another Piedmont player, Arthur.
Blind Arthur Blake.
Blind Arthur Blake.
Sure.
Yes. And as we were talking, Blind Boy Fuller, Blind Arthur Blake, Blind Reverend Gary Davis.
Right.
All Piedmont players. Why, Jorma, do you think you've followed like maybe the Reverend style instead of the Blind Blake style, since you were listening to him back then as well, you know, and I know they were kind of contemporaries.
Well, I learned a couple of Blake songs like Police Dog Blues, but that's a good question. I guess I guess my take on the Reverend style, because I'm not a Reverend Davis specialist, my take on the Reverend style just felt more like home to me. For whatever reason, who knows?
Blind Blake, a monster player as well, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah. He's
And his picking style, Jorma's a lot different from the Rev.
Well, I think of course I've never seen him play, and I've never seen a video.
I think a lot of people got to see him play.
I think he's a three-finger picker.
Yeah.
I would say.
Now, Blind Boy Fuller was the one that Roy always tells the story. He went to New York and he fell apart. Is he the one that started the drinking and stuff?
Something. Yeah, but he is the third of that triumvirate of players, and really, you know, again, you know, because of the way things are with today's connected world, you can really, there's a lot more variety out there. But for me, those are the three guys.
Yeah.
Three people.
Oh, they're like the kings, you know. They're like the kings, really. All right. Women used to drive me crazy. Boy, I'm glad they don't drive you crazy anymore, man.
Oh,
back then when you were...
You're glad.
Back then when you were 19, I bet they really did drive you crazy. I wanted, if you remember anything about that song, it's a cool song. It's on the record listed as a traditional, but it seems like it's is it a Jorma original?
No, I learned it from Ian.
Okay.
I learned it from Ian. And again, I probably just used a lot of the stuff that I was learning back in those days. It wasn't important for me to actually learn the whole song with all the lyrics and stuff. So there's probably like an abbreviated lyrical version. I don't remember because it was so long ago, but definitely learned it from Ian. Hey, you know, and when you're 19, 20 years old, you know, right around the time you start to think you've got everything all figured out, it's good to know that women drive you crazy.
And some things never change. Yeah. Let's get to the last song on the record. And, boy, what a trip it is to get to walk down Reno Road with you. And Jorma, thanks again for taking the time to discuss this with us. That How Long Blues we're talking about, and boy,
yeah, buddy.
I just think of How Long Blues as such a, you know, it's like the cornerstone, the hot tuna catalog almost. You know, it's still, you know, I know we'd love to hear it. I was mentioning to you that, you know, I'd seen on a Happy Tron thing, you know, his video and teaching sessions, and he mentions How Long Blues was a song that was in every acoustic blues player's.
I mean that you know. That's just, I agree. I mean, that's just one of those songs. So, you know, back at the time when I learned that song, it used a bunch of chords that when I learned, Ian never told me the name of chords. He'd just go, this is how it goes. He'd show me, I'd try it out, I'd come back, I'd play it, he'd go, you suck. I told you this is how it goes, but How Long Blues? And then I wouldn't have gone up the net. I would have just done that. Yeah. But I mean, that was all like, you know, a lot of that stuff is kind of like blues boilerplate, and I don't mean to be dismissive. It's kind of just like the vocabulary of major key blues of that era, but it's just a great song. And those changes in the key of D, like as you know, because you're a guitar player yourself, certain keys lend themselves better to doing certain things than others. And, you know, a major key blues like that in the key of D, it's just like all these really gorgeous chords are right under your fingertips, you know.
Let me see here.
That make any sense at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. And I love the song. And
yeah, it's a great song.
And Jorma, have you heard any of your contemporaries play that song? Because other blues people do play it. Anything else you heard? Clapton did it on that Unplugged record, and he did a nice version of it. I wouldn't say it was a hot tuna Jorma version, but it was still pretty good. Yeah, pretty good.
What's the name of the other guitar player he had on that record? That's that acoustic record, right?
Yeah, Yeah, right.
It's a good record.
Yeah.
I mean, and and it doesn't surprise me that he did the song because it's one of those songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're thinking, especially thinking acoustic blues, of that more or less era, because the eras are it's like galaxies. They're expanding and contracting. Yeah, it's just a great song.
The song has had a good life. 1928, Leroy Carr, Scrapper Blackwell.
Yeah.
Well, Jorma, I've been waiting to do this all day. Oh, they didn't fall apart as good today.
Well done, John.
Wait, here we go. Yep. We are wrapping up.
We are.
We're wrapping up. And boy, the time once again went through so quickly. But we're really glad to get to go down Reno Road. And thanks for showing us around the neighborhood and talking about Jack's Rec Room. Man, I can see
Rec Room.
I can see that paneling on the walls.
I can too. And I think Jack said he went back to. He visited the place with the people that own it now. I think it's pretty much unchanged.
Did they let him in the house?
They did.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Check back. We got another great episode coming up.
We do.
You bet. Outro music, Jorma. Wait.